Why single men are happier than you think. Today's video comes from John Griffin, Life 2.0. I found myself checking out a lot of videos that I personally just think that are interesting, not in the same type of, I think, consistency with what I usually talk about on this channel. When I say that, I mean like as a married man, I still enjoy a lot of this guy's content. I think this is actually a very interesting video. And though I never agree with everything in most videos that I watch, I still think this has a lot of truth in it and can result in some good conversations. Check it out.
Single men are much happier than most people think. In fact, being single is such a relief for most men once they release themselves from that cultural paradigm that they need to have a woman in their life in order to be considered relatively happy. Well, the truth could not be further from the paradigm that we're living in. Men are much happier on their own without a woman in their lives, especially these days. Men right now, even approaching a woman is a very risky proposition. There's a relatively good chance that whatever you do is going to result in you either being canceled or turned into somebody's TikTok meme or being accused of being a creep or a predator. So why even bother? I mean, there's just way too much risk and way too little reward for most men to justify getting into a serious relationship with a woman.
I like the dogs. I like the walking. I like this. Reminds me of Northern California.
I would suggest that not only is it a bad idea for men to do this, but I think that men will ultimately be way happier on their own when they find their own path and they let go of this idea that they need to have a woman in their lives. Women are much more trouble than they're worth. Now, if you're a man and you're married and you've got a woman in your life, I hope it works out for you. But for those of you who have not found a woman and you feel like you need to, I want to offer this to you as an opportunity to give life a different thought, have a different perspective.
Okay.
Consider the possibility that not having a woman in your life is a blessing, and the opportunity for happiness for you is just as great or greater than any married man could be. So let's talk about it. We all get one life to live, and finding happiness is elusive enough as it is. But when men are facing bigotry from women that is endorsed and accepted by society as a whole, it makes it even more difficult. And so endeavoring to build relationships with women for many men is becoming less and less of an option. Men going their own way is just the natural order of things. And there's an enormous amount of fulfillment and opportunity for men out there on their own. And in fact, in many ways, women are a hindrance to men's happiness. It's our belief and idea that we need to have a woman in our life that has been the historical norm and the paradigm that we have been living under for such a long time, that breaking free of that paradigm and exploring our happiness and our independence and our ability to find meaning in our lives without the burden of having to care for a woman is just a great opportunity. So don't feel for a moment that you're not complete as a man just because you're not married or you don't have a full-time woman in your life.
You know, I just want to say this real quick. So far, there is very little that I actually disagree with, other than the whole like happiness thing. And you guys know, I think pursuing happiness, and I'm assuming he means happiness by the definition that most people use it by. That's the only thing I would disagree with, as a healthy pursuit for anybody. But so far, there's not much I disagree with. A lot of people out here who want marriage on both sides, men and women, and they would probably be better off without it. And they don't realize that until they've gone through that tragic divorce. Right, let's keep listening. Let's talk about the sponsor of this channel, fathershaverights.com. Engaged and soon to be married men, hiring the wrong lawyer can leave you with an overpriced, unenforceable prenup. Avoid the trap. Inside my step-by-step guide at fathershaverights.com, renowned attorneys James Sexton and the lead attorney lay out the exact questions to ask, red flags to spot, and proven steps to hiring the perfect prenup lawyer. The guide itself costs only a couple of dinner dates, far less than a single billable hour. Hit the link pinned to the top of the comment section lock in your guide, and join the hundreds of men securing their marriages the right way.
Because women are just one thing. They're just one option. And for those of you guys who are happily married, good for you, good on you. But if anyone who has been married for any length of time knows, it's not an easy track. I mean, it's a very, very difficult task being in a long-term relationship with a woman. They're
Right.
very difficult to manage. They're extremely emotional. They're extremely irrational. And they're very simple and straightforward in their needs and their desires, and they communicate it to you directly. Women are not like that. And so having relationships with them can be extremely difficult. So today we're going to talk about how men find happiness on their own without a woman in their lives. Society has a tendency to view men who are single as unfulfilled or lonely or incapable of having a full, meaningful life. And nothing could be further from the truth. In a society that has promoted women to the point where it's okay for them to say things like, all men should die, and men are useless,
Right.
and we don't need men anymore, and these kinds of bigoted statements without holding them accountable. If I said something like that about any ethnic group,
Right.
if I said that about women or transgenders or Jews or Catholics or Muslims, I would be called out as
You not only would you call that, you would lose your channel.
a bigot, as a racist, as a misogynist.
Right.
But women can get away with this shit like they're immune to society's standards. They can say evil, mean things about men without being held accountable.
Lots of truth.
And so it's very clear from that perspective and from the perspective of family court that women are getting most favored person treatment in the world right now. And in a marketplace between men and women, where it's very important that the dynamics at least have some kind of rules that everyone can play by and agree to, and women live outside of those rules, well, why would men want to enter into any kind of a long-term relationship with them? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Life 1.0 tells us that we need to get married. That's one of the boxes that we need to check in our lives. And I think as men being raised primarily by women, and inevitably, unless you were a helicopter child or you were a single child, you probably didn't get a lot of nurturing from your mother. I certainly didn't. I think that Generation Xers like me, we were not the purpose of our parents' lives. Oftentimes we felt like we were an impediment to their lives. So seeking out a woman's comfort is something that I think our generation really sought out, or that's something that we did. And I think even the boomers before us had a lot of the same experience.
I just want to say something. I'll give a bit of his background. I know he's been married and been divorced. And he said something there about how women are able to live outside certain rules and expectations. And if we're going to be really direct and speak directly, we see this a lot in like family court. And we also see this when it comes to expectations within the relationship, right? What are you bringing to the table? Questions that they don't want you to ask, because you shouldn't be asking those questions. She should be able to bring herself while you're bringing value. I think these are very valid points. These are things men should take into consideration for sure. And outside of religious reasons, because as a Christian, I believe it goes against my beliefs and God's expectations for my life to be out here sleeping around unmarried. And on top of that, the fact that I want biological children raised in a two-parent household, because I saw that coming up, I find value in marriage. The problem I usually see is that people who may not value marriage think every man shouldn't get married, and a man who does value marriage or who identifies as Christian thinks that everybody should be Christian, when the truth is we all choose the life that we live, and then in the end, we accept the consequences that come with that. Let's keep listening.
If I had known 25, 30 years ago, 30 plus years ago, what I know now, I certainly wouldn't have been so eager to get married. And we all have our different reasons at different times. And at the time when I got married, I was a single father. So finding someone who could play that maternal role for my son was a high priority. But in retrospect, it was a mistake.
Mm.
You know, I think that my life probably would have been just as happy or much happier, and certainly a lot more financially rewarding if I had remained single. Well, you never know. You know, life happens.
Right.
But I guess my point is, don't feel like getting married is something that is critical to your life. There's so much more to life than marriage and raising children. There's lots of ways to find fulfillment. Don't get stuck in the paradigm. Getting married and having a family, that's just one option. But because it conforms to societal norms and historical precedent, it's something that men feel obligated to do. The truth of the matter is, it's just a paradigm that has not been challenged in a big way for a very long time. I think that a lot of our ancestors probably figured it out that living with a woman for the rest of your life probably wasn't an ideal solution for most men. The fact of the matter is, our ancestors, our ancient ancestors, spent an awful lot of time away from home.
This is
They
true.
were hunting and, you know, and they'd be gone for weeks at a time on hunting trips,
Right, right.
finding new places to live, just going out and exploring the world. Staying at home and being a father and a husband was not something that most men did a long time ago.
I mean, when you just think of the cell phone, imagine all the things you say with a couple. If you've ever been in a relationship, you don't have to be actually married. You know, people communicate through phones when someone's at work. Imagine you had to wait till you got home to actually talk about your day and the things you were thinking and what you have to plan instead of sending it via text. So no wonder people get tired of each other so quickly.
Financially, single men do quite well. In fact, there are several studies that show that financially single men are doing much better than their romantically entangled counterparts. Now, granted, there are some benefits if you meet the right girl and she can pull her weight and help buy you a house. But for the most part, single men do much better on their own than having a woman in their lives. Budgeting is made much simpler. Prioritizing needs and desires is much more straightforward. You don't have to worry about, you know, someone else's spending habits or their fetish for furniture or whatever it may be. You can decide what's important to you and spend your money on it, or you can just stash that money away and save it for a rainy day or a sunny day if you like. But yeah, being financially independent as a single man is much more straightforward and simple than it is when you're married, especially if you're financially going to be caring for this woman and maybe even a few children. Oh my gosh, just look at the cost of putting kids through preschool. Forget about college. My God, it costs you a couple $1,000s a month per kid to put them through a preschool program. And then when you get to college, if you got a real smart kid, you could be easily paying $500,000 or $600,000 to get your kid through college. Now imagine how you could use that money on your own. Yeah, yes. You start to see the benefits already. It doesn't take a genius to figure this one out.
So I'd have to probably disagree with him on that. And I want to be careful here because I think it would depend on the man who you're speaking with. And so what I'm not talking about is his title. I think his title is actually very true. Why single men are happier than people think. I do think that society looks at single men and thinks, oh, they're probably not that happy. I think a lot of them are happier than people think. Now, with that being said, like I said earlier, I don't like that term happy just because happiness is like this fleeting motion that comes and goes and is hard to really quantify. This is why, you know, you often, when you do these type of studies, you ask people about like life satisfaction. And when you look at the most miserable women, for example, these are women who are earning over like 100K, most educated, they're single, they're independent, they're very much involved in putting their career first. They are taking the most antidepressant medication. And when they do these life satisfactory tests, they find out that both married men and women report to have higher life satisfaction. What we can't do what we see chicks do all the time when you give them data, is that they sit there and now start doing gymnastics. Right. I want to see the information. It's right there. You can go look it up yourself. And please don't get me wrong. No, this does not mean men should get married, right? You got to have nuance if you're going to participate in this conversation. Doesn't mean men should get married. I still believe there are a lot of men who wouldn't actually have that type of life satisfaction and would be better off being single. I think more today than ever, for sure, especially given the current state of modern women and the options and expectations that a lot of these delusional chicks have in our modern day.
My typical excuse for that stupidity was, well, everyone else was doing it. And of course, my parents' response to that was the classic, well, if everybody else was jumping off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? I'm like,
Right.
shit. Anyway, that applies here and now better than ever. Everybody's getting married. Everybody's jumping off a bridge. Just because they're doing it, does that mean you should do it? Be smarter. Don't feel like you have to get married. You don't have to jump off that bridge. There are lots of other things you could be doing with your time, money, peace of mind, and all of that stuff. So just because everybody else is jumping off the bridge doesn't mean you've got to go too. Modern society would have us believe that married men are in better shape, live longer, and are happier. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Definitely not in better shape. Definitely not in better shape.
Single guys are much more likely to take care of themselves. They're in much better shape physically.
That's a fact.
Their health is far better.
That's
They
a fact.
have much more time for physical activity.
Right.
They go to the gym a lot more. And they tend to have better mental health because they are self-sufficient. So they have much greater levels of self-esteem and general happiness in their lives. Married men, especially men that are unhappily married, which is the vast majority of them, tend to die of heart attacks and strokes and cancer at much higher rates than single men. So if you really want to live a long time and you want to look good and feel great, there's a lot of advantages to being single. I don't know why married men get fat. Maybe they think they're off the market. They don't need to worry about themselves anymore. But generally speaking, married men tend to be in much worse physical condition than their single counterparts.
That's so true.
So, single guys, got a lot to look forward to there. Being healthy, strong, mentally fit. Yeah, what could be better? I mean, if you're going to live your life and you want to be happy and healthy, there's a lot of advantages to remaining single.
Right. That is so true, man. If you're a single guy right now and instead of sitting there and beating yourself up over maybe you wanting a partner and thinking that it's this type of, because people fall into this type of like fairy tale expectation, understand that it is a lot of sacrifice, building, and work that goes into it. Now, when it's done right, it is a beautiful thing, but it comes with its consequences. He asked a question there, like, I don't know why married men get fatter. Now, this is in no way an excuse, but you just have a lot of things going against you when you have a wife and you have a child. And I mean going against you when it comes to your physical fitness, because you have to make sure you prioritize that time to work out a lot more. Doesn't mean that you should use that as an excuse ever. But sometimes you may let yourself go. And there's seasons, right? We just had a child, as you guys know, close to a year ago. And these past, I would say, just this month, I've been fasting almost daily. And today I haven't had anything to eat. I've just had my coffee here and I have some water. Eventually I do eat and I replenish with electrolytes and making sure I get some good healthy nutrients, not too heavy on the carbs. And that has been amazing. But when it came to figuring out a schedule and everything, it took time, right? It took time to sort of figure that out. I couldn't do it like I used to do it in the past, where I was like, yeah, I'll just hit the gym whenever I want to hit the gym. Whenever I'm done with this, the next thing is the gym. When you have a son who's there crying and you got to figure out if he's been changed or eaten or so on and so forth. You know how it goes. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir to many of you.
Another study found that single guys are much more likely to prioritize their happiness and fulfillment in life. So they are not being tied down by someone else's needs and desires. They're no longer trying to fulfill someone else's image of what their life should look like. They find fulfillment in prioritizing their own happiness and fulfillment in life.
That's good.
Emotional growth and independence is something that single men prioritize in their lives. They tend to be much more psychologically stable. They have a lot fewer difficulties when it comes to emotional health, psychological health. They tend to prioritize those things in their life. Singles experience much more psychological growth, self-determination. They're much less likely to settle into a relationship out of fear or insecurity. They're much more likely to feel independent, resilient. There's just so many advantages to being single. The overall level of happiness when you're single and you're not worried about someone else's happiness is just unreal.
Mm.
So don't be afraid of embracing a single lifestyle. There are a lot of advantages to it. And just because you're single doesn't mean you're not going to have women in your life. It just means that you're not going to make them your life. That's the difference. Guys who have never been married and remain single through their lives tend to have a lot more friends than their married counterparts. They tend to prioritize these relationships and put a lot of energy into them.
That is a fact.
That gives them a lot more balance in their life. It gives them a lot more social outlets in their life. They're no longer, compared to their married counterparts who find themselves very isolated in this relationship and dependent on this one other person for all these different needs they have in their life. Single guys are much more balanced socially and emotionally because they have all these friendships. So don't overlook the value of remaining single.
Yeah.
There are a lot of advantages to it.
That social aspect is so true, man. So true. And I don't know what it is, but as a man, as soon as you enter a relationship, and people like to make it sound like it's on both sides, but a man will typically sacrifice friendships, trips, so he could save money, and because he knows he has the burden of performance for the family. And you will see women typically in those cases when they're married, they will make sure they do the opposite. They prioritize making sure they're seeing their girlfriends. The moment you start doing that as a man, it becomes a problem. But I actually think that you should make sure you're taking time for yourself more often if you're a man who is not only in a relationship, but is also married. But if you're a guy who's single, yeah, build friendships, build strong friendships. You can probably build a strong brotherhood a lot easier as well, just because of your availability.
I remember when I was a boy hanging out with my friends, and we would talk about what we would do when we grew up. We even thought about running away from home just so we could get there faster, because we really just wanted to grow up, and experience all those benefits, all that freedom of being out from underneath the yoke of a parent. Well, then you grow up and you put yourself under the yoke of a woman. Why would you do that? Really, when you think about it,
That's funny.
all the fun and adventure that the world has to offer, you're going to trade all of that so you can get married and give all your time, energy, and money to a woman. Now, I have to admit, I love my kids and I love, being a dad, and there's a lot of wonderful things about it. But if that doesn't work out for you, don't sweat it. I mean, really, the world is your oyster. Go out there and do the things that you wanted to do. Don't be afraid. I think fear is what people's most biggest problem is when it comes to this, is men are afraid to get out there and actually see what their potential is. What can they do? What could they do? Yeah, just shed that stuff. Just go out there and do it. You only got this one life. You might as well live it. You might as well have a great time while you're at it.
Guys, that's it. There's some good stuff here on John Griffin Life 2.0. Of course, guys, always curious to know what you think, what you disagree with, whatever. Comment section, always open to it. Hey, guys, as always, I appreciate you for checking out yet another episode of The Coffee Pod. To my currently engaged or soon-to-be married men, if you need a prenup and would like a guide that shows you how to get a solid and legally binding prenuptial agreement, hit the link pinned to the top of the comment section and access your guide at fathershaverights.com today.